All right, welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Swoboda from Fort Collins Police Services. He has over 30 years experience in law enforcement, and wellness is something that is a huge priority and focus to him. So I'm really excited to have him as a guest. So welcome, Chief Swoboda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
I am too. No pressure though, right?
None, none.
So you've been a chief for 15 years. That
Yeah,
is a long time to be in an executive position. And we kind of we're talking offline a little bit. And, I heard through the grapevine that maybe 5 years is kind of average, but you've been in this position for 15 years. That's amazing.
yeah. It's like life, right? It goes by quick. You turn around, you're like, wow, 15 years. And it was with two different agencies. I was 8 years at an agency in Illinois, and then now I am 7 years here in Colorado. So it's gone quick, and in my entire career is 33 years, and so 15. I'm catching up to where I'm going to be half of my career in policing will be as a police chief. So that's just kind of wild, but yep, that's accurate. 15 years.
That's amazing. And for anyone who doesn't know you, could you maybe give a little bit of background on what the last 33 years looked like, how you got started in law enforcement, maybe some of the assignments you've had throughout your career?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I got hired in 1992. The city was Elgin. It's just outside of Chicago, about 45 minutes outside of Chicago. And I ended up staying there 26 years. But at the beginning of my career, I went into a program called the Resident Officer Program. And what that program is, because it still is today, it's a little bit smaller than what it was at one point, but it's where you put a police officer in a neighborhood that's experiencing various different issues, various different stresses occurring in that neighborhood. It could be kids that don't have anything to do and there's no playground, so they're doing things and maybe causing damage. Could be drugs, could be gangs, could be anything. But calls for service are high in that neighborhood, so we put police officers in those neighborhoods, and the idea is just improve the quality of life in that community. So I went into that after only about 2 years on the job. And I spent 5 years as a resident officer, and I learned so much, things that I still rely on today, because it was about working with the community. And so I did that for about 5 years. Eventually got promoted. I've been, patrol. I was over accreditation. I was over our gang and drug units as I got promoted to lieutenant, and then became a deputy chief, and was over everything from budget to patrol, everything that people do, kind of rotated around a couple different deputy chief assignments, and then eventually became police chief in 2010 and served there until 2018. And yeah, and then looked around the country and found Fort Collins, Colorado, and it's an amazing place. So I was very happy where I was at, but saw this as an opportunity to come. And so ended up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I've been here for 7 years. And it's an amazing community, and different challenges than we had in Elgin, but still, working with the community, we're solving a lot of problems.
I love it. And I don't know how I didn't pick up on the Chicago accent before you said that because I lived in Illinois for a little while. I lived in Rosemont and Naperville area. So I should have caught on to that
Yes.
kind of Midwest accent early on, but I didn't. No, I love that. And I wanted to touch on your time working in the community because we talked a little bit about this offline, and you had some really, really good insights into community impact, and how important that is to not have a you versus them type of environment. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm just a big believer in, we really do work for the community. And if we bring them in and have them help us tell us what the issues are and work with them to solve those issues, that's where you can really have success. Departments that go into neighborhoods, and even when they make quality arrests, but then leave and don't have connections to that community, there's trust isn't improved. Sure, things are a little bit better and they're glad the cops came and made an arrest, or maybe, shut down a drug house or things, but real long-term relationships aren't formed. And in anything, whether it's policing or just in life, it's all about relationships. This human experience, I believe, is a team sport, and you can't go through it alone. And at least I don't believe you can be fulfilled alone without having some type of greater group around you, whether it's your friends, whether it's your families, and in policing, the fact you can have community around you to help you do your job better, to have a bigger impact. It's like, why don't we do this more? And policing's caught on. We've, as a profession, gotten much better with recognizing the need to engage our community so you can have legitimacy and actually have greater impact. So I've just found early on that, man, there's nothing you can accomplish. There's nothing you can't accomplish if you have the community with you. And there's a lot of things you simply can't accomplish if you don't have the community with you. You're not going to be able to have great change in a neighborhood if the community doesn't support what you're doing.
Yeah, and do you think that that could potentially change outcomes? Like, do you think that in the past it could have changed outcomes? Do you think that by focusing on it now, it can change future outcomes, having that community engagement?
Yeah, I think everybody looks, once you have a relationship and you can talk with someone and understand, I've had many people in my life tell me, I don't like the police, but I
Mhm.
like you, Jeff. Right. And if we could have more examples like that, every officer has people like that they've encountered. And
Yeah.
if we can get past the uniform and recognize that each of us are, again, individuals, human beings trying to lead a life of purpose and things, the same goes true with our community members, even in quote unquote bad neighborhoods. Too often police recognize a neighborhood as being bad. And so they do things like zero tolerance, which means we're going to write everybody tickets or we're going to arrest everybody. And it's like, how about being a little bit more strategic? And how about saying, no, we do have tolerance for the people who are caught up in something. The
Mhm.
people that are causing the issues, yes, they need to be held accountable. But I've said it many times that, I don't believe there are such thing as bad neighborhoods. I think there are neighborhoods where bad things happen regularly for a variety of reasons. But the actual piece of ground, most people live in those neighborhoods, want the same things that we all want, and they want to be safe. So without a relationship, and in years past, policing has done this, they go into entire neighborhoods and they say they're all the enemy because there's crime here. So it's kind of like at all costs, we're gonna make arrests and stop the crime. And in the meantime, they just create a bunch of mistrust, people who don't like the police, and then we sit around as cops wondering why doesn't the community support us? And so I do think relationships matter, and I think it can make a police officer's life easier, better, feel more fulfilled. And the community members who are in the neighborhoods where police are operating, they can feel better because they can see the police as a partner. And I think that absolutely changes outcomes.
Yeah, 100%. I love that you use the word trust a lot, and building that trust and that support, and where the community knows that you're there to help them, and if there are people who are in these neighborhoods that are raising a family and aren't causing the problems, and they just want to raise their kids and they want to be in a safe neighborhood, to feel like you're there, they can trust you, they're supportive of you, and trying to make it a better partnership. I like that you use that word partnership too.
Yeah, and as we're doing it, we're creating relationships, and show me any relationship that's a good relationship where there's no
Mhm.
communication. I don't think it can exist. If there's not real communication, there's not going to be a relationship. And so the same holds true when we're out there and we're trying to improve the quality of life of a community. We can't just be present, because driving through doesn't, they don't know what that means. So great, someone's present. Doesn't mean they're there. It doesn't mean there's connection. It doesn't mean there's continue to be conversations about the future. So we have to have more conversations and not just be present. Same thing like anything we do, our school resource officers. It's not about having an officer in the school. It's great. There's an officer in the school. If that officer is in his office the whole time and not engaging with people, being present isn't good enough for a solid relationship. There has to be communication. And so I believe that that's where the rubber meets the road in policing, especially in communities. It's being present, yes, but being vulnerable, having conversations, recognizing in policing where we could have done things better, or explaining why we do things. And so I think that's where I think we can continue to have better relationships and then also better outcomes.
I love it. And I agree with you. I think communication is key always. And, I know that within your organization, you really try to communicate the importance of wellness within your team. And even more so, you have opened and launched your own police academy with an emphasis on wellness and having these conversations early in the career and trying to create that culture. Can you maybe showcase some of the things that you've done, how you've done it, what kind of emphasis you're putting on wellness? Because I think it's really, really cool what you're doing. And I don't know if I've heard of a lot of agencies who have done that within their academy as robustly as you have.
Yeah, to launch our own academy, we did it about 4 years ago, maybe going on 5 years, probably 4.5 years ago. And it's expensive and it's very labor intensive. It takes a lot of people to run your own police academy. It's much easier to write a check and send people off for 20, 24 weeks, whatever the amount of weeks is, depending on the state, and have them come back trained. That's much easier. Where the real work is, though, I believe, is starting people at ground one and bringing them into a culture. And what we talk a lot about is a culture of care, and something we're trying to really get some. It's kind of something we've been talking about just recently. But the idea is that we have an academy. We hire people. We go out. We recruit them. We talk with them. We bring them in, and then we were sending them off to some other place to train them. And sometimes they'd come back and they'd have tactics that we didn't agree with. And we just said, why are we doing this? Like, if we care enough about this individual and we want them to be successful, we want to train them. We want them to understand why we do things. We don't care that, their uniform was a little messed up, so they had to get down and do 25 push-ups, or they had to run a little bit more because they were late. Like sure, we can do those things to ourselves, but really the understanding of the why. And I think we take it upon ourselves to really spend time talking about why. And so how that feeds into us having our own academy and wellness is from the very beginning. We have wellness instructors. We have people that focus on yoga. We do yoga in our academy. We have conversations about the power of just breathing and deep breath and reflection and calming your mind and recognizing when you've been hijacked, your blood pressure's up, you're not thinking straight, you recognizing that. And so we talk about that. But then on the second side of that, we also talk about how, if we really care about ourselves and our organization, how do we recognize when somebody else has been hijacked, and how do we step in? And it's many times called bystandership, whatever. If you see somebody doing something wrong, and it might not even be on purpose, they might just be very amped up. How do we step in? And so how does the person, regardless of rank, regardless of time on, how does a person who sees another officer elevated, how do they step in to make sure that they protect that officer and protect whoever the officer is talking to? How does an officer who's emotional at the moment, how do they recognize that if somebody taps them on the shoulder and says, I got it from here, how do they recognize that's not a disrespectful thing? They're doing it out of love. They're doing it out of care. And so now that officer says, okay, they're seeing something I'm not, I'm going to remove myself. And then lastly, how do we see that in the community? That we interact with people in the community who also sometimes are really emotional and maybe not thinking clearly. And so how do we not judge people on their worst day, in their worst moment of their life? And so how do we interact with them out of care? And so on day one, we start talking about that in our academy. And then for the next 22, 23 weeks, we kind of feather that into every single topic that we're talking about. Because in the end, the tactic is important. What we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what equipment are we going to use? All of that is important, but taking a step back and saying, why are we doing all this? Here's what we're thinking. Here's the thought process behind it. That's another way of leading an academy. And so that's why I'm so proud of the academy we have, because it's really grounded in this idea that we care for each other, we care for our community, and we want good outcomes. And because of that, we're going to train you the absolute best and have you understand why we're doing this at every step of the way, rather than here's the law, here's our policies, make sure you follow all that. Now go out there and do great work. Like, it's just a different mindset. So I'm super happy about our academy.
I'm going to dissect a few of these things
Okay.
because one, I completely agree that the why is so imperative. And I think, especially with the younger generation, I think that a lot of people want to know why more, and you have those questions. And I live by this statement: if the why is deep enough or is important enough, then the what and the how become easy, right? So, like,
Mm-hmm.
starting there of like, why is this important? As step one, okay? And then it's like, okay, now what can we do? So why is wellness important? What can we do? And you mentioned some of those tactics. So yoga, mindfulness, deep breathing. And then how do we do that? So how do you implement that into your routine, into your career? How do you have that self-awareness and that self-regulation when these things are happening? How do you then, have more empathy and care for people? And so I love everything you said of like the why, the what, the how. And I also say this all the time, but it kind of goes back to my 3 steps of growth and success is step one is, awareness. Step two is education. Step three is action. So it kind of goes with the why, the what, the how, right? It's like having that awareness that this is important, having the education as to what you can do, and then action, which is arguably to me the most important, because if you have awareness and education, but you're not doing anything about it, it doesn't really matter. So having that like actionable step, okay, this is, how we're gonna be able to then, create that culture of care. This is how we're gonna, act within the community. This is how we're gonna take care of ourselves. So I loved it.
Yeah, and
I
if we're doing
digress.
that, what's that?
I said I digress. I think
Yeah, no, I love it.
I went
I
on
mean,
a rant.
those are the kind of things. I'm having some police leaders from around the country come out to Fort Collins, and we have conversations like this. We have big conversations, not so much again about tactics, but about the why and how can we get better. Because many times, we're seeing things that need to change. We're having action, and then there's not enough of self-reflection and taking a step back and assessment to, are the things I'm doing changing what I started out to change? Versus we're doing all these things. We tell ourselves we're making a difference. Nobody's told us otherwise. So let's keep going. And, autopsies, to kind of use a dumb example, autopsies are always done after somebody dies, right? You can't do an autopsy on a living person. But we can do, these autopsies after actions on incidents. And even when it goes right, I believe in life, don't ever mistake good luck for good tactics. Because something worked out doesn't mean you did all the steps right. I mean, it happens in our own lives. It happens, right? Wow, that worked out well. I must have done it right. No, you didn't do it right. You just got lucky. And so, how do we have conversations around that? And when we're having these action items and we're trying to change behavior, we're trying to make people feel engaged, we have to then continue saying, hey, is it getting better? What are your thoughts? Where are we at? Get that feedback, because the best feedback comes from our critics many times. So I hear people talking all the time about, don't listen to your critics. Don't, what, and yeah, you don't want to be surrounded by all critics all the time, but don't be surrounded by a bunch of people patting you on the back saying you're doing a great job. I love, the most I learn is when I go to neighborhood meetings when people are unhappy with the police about something. That's where I think I experience the most growth. And I think I can also offer information that hopefully helps them to grow as well. If I go to meetings where everybody loves you, great job, chief. Yeah, grab some coffee. So how things go? And it's a nice conversation. It's not moving the ball anywhere, but having conversations with people that think differently, that they might suggest that what you're doing is not working or it's wrong. Like, those are, I think, the most meaningful conversations. And so you got to have open dialogue. You got to be okay with people telling you you've got a scar that they can see, and you're like, yeah, I do. And here's how I got it. And here's how we're trying to get better. What are your thoughts? Where am I on track? Where am I off track? Like, we just have to feel, too often police chiefs or anybody in leadership, they use their title, their rank, whatever, as a way to shield them from criticism. And it's like, man, we need to be able to take on the most criticism because we're the ones who can do the most change. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer in real conversations, even when they hurt.
I am too. And I think that to your point, like, what is the goal? Like, I think that you have to sometimes, like you said, take that step back or take that bird's eye view of, okay, what is the goal? And are we taking the most effective steps to achieve that goal? And are the steps that we're taking, are they successful? Because I agree with you. I've had so many conversations where people are like, "You're great. I love it." And I'm like, "Shoot it to me straight." Like, that's not helpful to me really at all. So having those hard questions of what am I missing? Like, what am I not doing the best of? How can I improve? But I think that you have to, on the other end, be open-minded to that constructive feedback, because if you aren't open-minded to adapting and adjusting the things that you're doing, then, it's kind of going to fall flat. Like, you have to, on the receiving end, be willing to take those steps and to pivot and to, try different things. And I think that that can be hard sometimes, as especially as we get older. And so one of the things that I try to pride myself on is that I'm super trainable. Like, I try to be really open to learning. I think that's the only way that you can progress. And I think that you do have to lean on like metrics a little bit. And I'm going to maybe talk from my business hat a little bit, but I think that reacting from emotion doesn't always give you a reality of what's going on in both ways. Like, you could be thinking that you're crushing it, And maybe that's not the reality. And you could also think that you just suck, and that's also not the reality. And so sometimes leaning on, I'm going to say like the quote unquote metrics of things, like what are those indicators of success and are we hitting those? And if we're not, how can we adjust to do that? So trying to take the emotion out of it and maybe have a little bit of a more like logical perspective of what's happening.
No, I love it. And identifying what are those metrics before you start. Because
Mm.
it's easy as you're going along the way, if you find the metrics that support what you're doing and you're like, oh yeah, look at that. That worked out well. Okay, then I'm on the right track. But if that wasn't you identifying that, because we can all look around and in all of our stories, we're all the hero, right? We know the great intentions we have. We know why we're doing things. Like we're the best person in our story, trying to be the noble person doing the great things. But realistically, at times we need to recognize when, hey, we're falling short, and that only comes with people in your life who are going to give it to you straight. And so I'm just a big believer that we're all a work in progress. We're all none of us want to be judged by our worst days in the past or our best days. It's like we all recognize we're hopefully better tomorrow than we are today, and that
Yep.
only comes with work and recognizing shortcomings and having people around you that love you and will support you in those endeavors. And so you bring it back from a person now to a community. The same can be with the police department. We've had plenty of instances I can think of where we didn't do a good job and we owned it and we said we're sorry and we said here's how we change and we're going to do better, and we show examples of doing that, and people will cut you breaks. Like, they recognize that cops are human beings. And so too often we don't want to fall back on that was our policy, that was the officer. Officers make split-second decisions. So yes, and are you recognizing that that just didn't go well? Are you recognizing that in another day, if there was another way, like maybe we could have done it a little bit different? And if we're too staunch of nope, that's how we do it, policy says we do, then we're not going to learn, we're not going to get better, and then we do just look like a big machine. And so I'd much rather have people recognize there's a bunch of men and women out there supporting them, responding to call for service, who are human. They're well trained, but they're going to make mistakes. They're going to see things differently. And so we just have to be honest about that. And that only comes with, again, being vulnerable, explaining what you're trying to do, and owning your own stuff. And when like you fall short, be like, yeah, that's not the way we want it to end either. And so I'm going to work a little harder to make sure we're trained a little bit better so that doesn't happen again. People will cut you slack all day on those situations, I believe. I've always found that.
I agree. And I mean, you could even make it a really simple example. Like, have you ever gotten in an argument with your partner and you're fired up and they go, "You're right. I didn't do that very well." And like immediately your guard is down and you're like, "Oh, well,
Right.
thank you. Like, thanks for saying that." Like, okay, like how do we move forward? And I think that it's immediately like disarming if you're like, you know what, I take accountability for that. And like I'm gonna have this like moment of vulnerability to say, yeah, like maybe that wasn't the best, and I'm gonna do what I can to make it better next time. Then it's like, whoa, okay. Like how do you stay elevated? You know,
Right.
I think that's a really, really good way to create that trust and that community and that partnership. I also know that you really try to embed wellness as a culture and not a program. And I'm gonna like toot your horn a little bit, but you are a public speaker and you speak all around the world about wellness and creating this culture of care. Can you explain, what you talk about and maybe some of your insights into how you can create a culture? Because you have a large organization. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know, like you have 240 sworn officers, 380-ish all in. And so we know that creating a culture is challenging in itself, but then as the organization gets bigger, it can become even more challenging. So if you can explain how you are embedding wellness into the culture.
Yeah. So this idea of culture of care really came about when I was just um, in Poland at it's called the Walk of the Living, and an amazing program that really anybody that went through it was extremely moved, and just talking a lot about the police role in the Holocaust. And many people, including myself, never really realized the police had played a major role in the Holocaust. And identifying Jews, putting them on trains, helping get, all of things, putting them in the ghettos, all of the things that happened. And so during this time, as we were talking and I was preparing to go out there and we were talking internally about our own vision, our own mission, and when we talk about culture, many times we say what our culture is. And I don't know. I mean, sure, again, going back to we're all the hero in our own story, we're going to say our culture is professionalism. We're going to say our culture is training. We're all the good things. But what does the community say our culture is? What do brand new officers say our culture is versus somebody who's been here 35 years? What do they say? And many times, and we've done this where we've asked different people had different opinions, on where their perspective was different. And so I got to this idea of if we really center on this idea of culture, and it's not on all of these other things, but it's really just about care. It's really about, we care about the individual, we care about our organization, we care about our community, and everything we do is around care. And even when people get in trouble, we talk about, like, how do we move from a system of gotcha, where you did something wrong, okay, we gotcha, to I got you. Like, hey, you're going down the wrong path, let's talk. And maybe you did do something wrong and we're going to correct it. You might get in trouble, you might get suspended, but we're going to correct it. We got you. We know that that wasn't you and you didn't do a good job. Now, if you do something really bad, then you can't work here anymore. I'm talking about correctable mistakes and things. So this idea of culture of care is really just boiling down what we do versus all these other descriptions that people have about what their culture is. And at the end of the day, I believe if your culture is about care, you'll do everything else. If I care about you, man, I'm going to do anything for you. I'm going to train you really well. I'm going to equip you well. When you make mistakes, I'm going to help you get better. When your mom is sick, I'm going to make sure we give you the time off of work. When your kid, all of those things, and it boils down to care. And so we're embarking on this endeavor of making sure our culture across the board and our community recognizes it as well, that we care. And it sounds so simple, and some could roll their eyes and say, okay, what does that even mean? I believe what it means is that if you care about somebody, then you'll do the little things. If you care about somebody, you'll own it and say, hey, sorry, I'm a little emotional. We didn't do a good job. Like, you'll do those things. And so that's what I spend a lot of time on, is just talking about this idea of culture. And it's not a program. It can't be, it brings me back to to community policing. People used to talk about community policing. Yeah, we have a program. It's like community policing isn't a program. It's a philosophy. It's a way you do business. And so I believe the same is true for wellness. It can't be, oh, we have a wellness program because we have yoga in our academy. So check the box. We have a wellness program because tonight we're meeting all of our new officers. They're bringing all their families. So we're having a family night so people can ask questions. Kids can ask questions about what dad's going to do. Spouses can ask questions. But it's all of those things. And so I think too often we talk about, people say they're doing it because they have a program. And my thought is ingrained in everything you do, which makes it a philosophy. You have a philosophy. If you have a philosophy of health in your life, then it's not that I go to the gym every day. Sure, okay, that's one thing. But do you also look at the labels of what you're eating? Do you go to bed at a certain time to make sure you're getting, like, that's a philosophy of health versus I go to the gym. That's a program. If that's all you do, I mean, it's better than doing nothing. But it's not what you're doing. It's something you go do. And so I think that's a huge difference. And I think when we're talking about wellness, too often it's seen as a program, and it's easy to cut. It's easy to say, having yoga instructors is too expensive, so we're cutting that program. I've never seen a police department complain about the price of guns and saying, you know what, guns are too expensive, so let's not give our officers guns. Oh, that might seem silly, but it's not. If it's truly an important piece of what you're trying to accomplish, then it, kind of like budgets tell you what's important. The old adage that I'll tell you what's important in your life by you telling me what you spend your money on. Then I'll tell you what's important. Don't tell me what's important. Show me where you're spending your money, and then I'll tell you what I think your values and what you value is. And so I think the same is with police departments. And so if it's truly something you care about, and it's truly something that all of your officers and you want wellness, you want it to be ingrained in everything you're doing, then you will find the money. You'll hire maybe less cops and have more money for wellness. Maybe that's an option. But to just say we don't have the money for wellness, again, I think it's an easy out.
Well, I think it goes back to, like, what is your why?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, full circle, like, your why is care. And what are the things that you need to accomplish that? And I love this idea of it's ingrained and it's a philosophy. It's not just a checkbox thing. Because I do think that it's easier to, like, check a box, right?
Oh,
And just be like, yep, we got this, and this. Are people using it? We don't really know. Like, we don't really get metrics for it. We don't know, but we have it, but instead you're like, no, like our why is care and our why is that, our people are good and it's a philosophy and it's not just this thing that we say we have and we don't know if it's working. And I know that you are a fan of the word holistic when it
Mhm.
comes to wellness, which I love. But I know that maybe some people aren't quite on board with that word yet. I don't know. But what does that look like to you? What does holistic wellness look like to you? And what maybe pillars do you think are important to prioritize?
Yeah, that's something that we're working on now as well. I'm trying to create kind of a one pager because I love that idea of what you talked about with pillars. And kind of, if we had a one page, almost a diagram of what this means to us, if we could have those and hang those on the wall. Again, words can be hollow sometimes. We can say whatever we want to say. We can print it out and put it in a frame and hang it on a wall. It doesn't mean we're doing it. So I'd love to have a visual. And so we're still kind of messing with that. So I love that you said pillars. But really, when we talk about holistic, it's in everything we do. It's after important calls for service. Are we checking in with people? Do they need to take some time? And I think, when we talked once before, it's really pushing this idea, and the fire service, I think, has this figured out. After a traumatizing call, not just for the person that the officer was trying to help, but for the officer themselves, any of us would need to take a breath. But in policing, we don't allow that because there are calls holding. And so, yes, you just gave CPR to a baby and you're not sure if they made it or not because they went to the hospital, but you're on to the next call for service. And what that does to a person. So, thinking about it that way too, how we are responding to calls for service has a wellness component to it. When someone is dealing with something at home and they're coming in and they got a broken relationship, are they at their best to go out there and serve the community? If people are coming in and they're broke, they for whatever reason they've invested poorly and they're going to lose their house, are they really going to go out and perform well as a police officer? And so you could say that in so many circumstances. So this idea of wellness isn't just you know doing yoga, breathing exercises, physical fitness, all of these other things. It's even more so taking the person out of it, and sitting down with a human being and asking, how are you doing? Where can we do better? Are you in a game? I like to say, if you wake up in a bad mood, all of us wake up in a bad mood from time to time. In policing, it's a great reason to call in sick. Like, don't come to work in a bad mood, because in this career, it's a very quick way to lose your entire career because you were in a bad mood. You're in a bad mood and you're checking people out at the grocery store and you were short with someone. The consequences might not be as severe as being a police officer who can use deadly force. Showing up in a bad mood as a police officer, not a good. And so this whole idea that we're trying to talk about is like, let's look at everything we're doing, the types of cars we're giving people, and how, when they have to type on their computer, does it make sense? Are we causing back injuries because of the way they're doing it? Having a heavy gun on your hip, is that creating issues for people with, they need to see chiropractic? Like, everything we're doing, looking at it through the lens of wellness. And are we creating people who are stronger and able to handle this difficult job? Or are we doing a bunch of little things like mandatory overtime, canceling vacation, giving them squad cars that's making their back hurt, knowing they're going through a bad divorce, yet we still have them come in and just go out and hit the street and nobody checked in with them? All of those things, I believe, are where we're trying to get to when we talk about holistically. Is the person prepared to go out and do this difficult job? And then hopefully someday have a great retirement where they look back and saw that they lived a life of service and they're proud of their career, versus, you know what, I made some bad decisions when I was in a bad spot in my life and it cost me my career. I say, that obviously that's not good for the person, but shame on the supervisor for not seeing that and not stepping in, and the department not having a culture where they say, it's okay. People are going to ask you, how are you doing? I know you're going through a divorce right now. Are you okay? What's going on today? You don't need to get personal with it, but you okay? Do you need a different assignment? You want to work in the station today? We'll figure that out. You're going to take reports over the phone. Like, having those conversations, I think, is so important. And that, to me, is a philosophy. It's holistically looking at a whole individual and saying, we want you to be at your best when you go out and do this difficult job.
Yeah, you said a lot of things that I have never heard or considered, and I think it's really interesting. I think when you start to go down the rabbit hole of how can we look at everything and then look at it from the lens of wellness, how can we make the car is more ergonomical, or how can we, switch maybe from the weight around your waist to maybe an exterior vest. Like there's all these questions of like how can you create that longevity? And you said a lot of really interesting things. I was like, wow, like that's really cool. And I think that if you start to dive deeper into everything, then you just have a better idea of how you can improve. Because I do think sometimes it goes back to what we said, the bird's eye view, like sometimes you do get in that one track mind of like, oh, this is just how we do it. But if you're like, but why do we do it and how can we do it better? I also think that sometimes the little things are the most important. And to your point of how are you?
Mhm.
Like, are you okay? That doesn't take money. That doesn't take funding.
Right.
It does take, like you said, effort to create that philosophy and that culture of care where people feel empowered to do that. And they have that awareness, like you said, that self-awareness of being able to look at someone and recognize maybe some of those signs, or to ask people and have more of that connectivity within the organization. But that doesn't take money to have someone sit down and say, hey, I know that you're having some challenges at home. Are you okay? Um, and you spell holistic HOL, right, in the beginning. But have you seen it where they will post it with whole, like
Well,
WHO?
mhm. Yep.
And I like that because I think that if you can ask yourself, how can we make people whole?
Mhm.
And that's at home. That's physical, that's mental, that's organizational, in your job. How can we make you whole? So you feel really good and you can have a long career and you can have a long and successful retirement, which is everyone's goal. No one wants to get to the end of this career and not have a long, successful retirement. That is never the goal. So how can you put in place things that make everyone whole? And I wanted to go back to one of the things that you said about taking breaks, and knowing like when you need to like take a step away. And I know that that's something that you guys are really trying to focus on in the future is how can you identify the times when, maybe there was a certain call where it's like, hey, like it's not an option. Like I'm telling you, like you need to take a breather. You need to take a 20-minute break or a coffee break. Or maybe you do need to take the day off. And so I really appreciate that approach of like if we're gonna say if you want the community and you want everyone to recognize that you're humans, then I think that you also have to operate as humans and recognize that you're not robots. And there are going to be times where you need to take a tiny step back to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. And, police officers aren't built that way in many ways. They'll say, well, I know there's calls holding. I don't want to leave that for my partner. I need to get back out there and do this job. And, again, I say shame on the supervisor, shame on the organization. And everything I'm saying, I just want to be clear, like, we don't have this figured out. I don't have this figured out. Like, we're still trying to say, how can we get better? Going back real quick to what you said, it doesn't take any time or money to ask somebody how you're doing. And doesn't take any time or money to actually care, to stop and listen. And I'm a big offender of that. Walking by people and saying, "How are you? Hey, how you doing?" and then keep walking.
Mm.
Like, and so I've even tried to work on that and change. So in my mind, I'll say I'm saying hello to people. Stop asking how they're doing if I'm walking by. Because yeah, how you doing? Well, I was going to tell you, Chief, but you were already halfway down the hall by the time I could have. So just say hello. Like, because I'm a big believer in always smiling and greeting everybody. So just say hello. Don't ask them how they're doing. If you don't have time to actually wait and hear the response. And so I'm figuring that. And that came through feedback as well from people. Like I walk fast, I talk fast, I'm on the move a lot. And so people are like, you're just all like, people sometimes don't want to approach you because they feel like you're in the middle of something. I'm like, well, I usually am in the middle of something, but I need to change a little bit. I need to slow down. Even with talking, I need to slow down. So going back to your question, with all of these things, I'm just such a believer in this idea that, let's stop putting up the facade of who we want everybody to think we are, right? Like, I don't care whether it's personal life or career, like we're all a work in progress. So let's take the time, let's talk with people. Nobody should be okay after giving CPR to a baby. You should not be okay. You should be, oh my gosh, I need to call and talk to my kids. I need to call and talk to my mom. I need to call and talk to my, like, you should have to do something other than feel obligated to go to another address and help somebody else again, because you shouldn't be okay. So we're trying to push is this idea that there are certain calls that trigger a mandatory break and you don't have an option. You are not allowed to go to another call. So if you don't want to go and have coffee, then don't. We're not going to, pour coffee down your throat, but we're going to give you a half hour to say, if you want to go get coffee, go get coffee. If you want to run to the gym and just do a quick 15-minute workout just to kind of, process all that, let's do that. And I have seen officers' careers end because the call they were on went bad. But if you really look at what happened, it was the call they were on just before. And
Mm.
that call, had we done a better job of recognizing that this person probably needs a break, we need to talk with them, they never would have went to this call. And so I know our academy's working when I'm sitting in our roll call and a young officer, she says she was just dealing with she was on a gun call, cleared that, and went to a 15-year-old that was being very mouthy. And it was another female, a female 15-year-old. She's being very mouthy, and the officer is starting to lose it internally. She's like, I just sensed it, like, this girl, I was going to tell her. And then I started breathing, and I told my partner, I said, you know what? You got it from here. I'm going to go into the car for a second.
Yeah.
And the officer recognized it. So he stepped in and was fine. And she's like, I just went and got some fresh air, and just said, holy cow. And whether it was triggering from her childhood, or triggering for her from her own child, potentially, I don't know what it was, but something, was just really getting under her skin with this person. And even then she recognized, she's like, I never processed that I was just on a call with somebody with a gun. And boy, if that would have went differently, what would have happened? How could that? And so she was still mentally back here dealing with this, had a short fuse. And so that's when I know, like, the work we're doing in the academy matters, because she went through our academy, and it's that stuff works. Just recognizing when you're starting to be hijacked. We all know it. Our blood pressure is going up. For me, my face starts getting red. I can feel my tensing up. And when that's happening, like, too often we let life momentum just take us places, right? Well, I've already done this. I guess I got to do, and momentum. And then we sometimes look like, how the heck did I get here? And
Yeah.
so recognizing that momentum is taking me to a place maybe I don't want to go, you got to break that. You got to step back, get out of the chain of sequence of events that are occurring, and just take a breath, take a moment, and talk to yourself, talk to somebody else. And so all of those things, the mandatory breaks, the talking with people, seeing how they're doing, actually stopping and waiting for a response, teaching people how to lower their blood pressure by just simply breathing, and like, all of those things are very soft skills, but man, they save lives, I believe, and they definitely save careers.
I agree. And that story that you just told, to me, that's a metric of success. What we
Yeah.
were talking about, and that's emotional regulation. And uh, I teach this all the time. I don't know if you teach it in the same way, but you're obviously teaching this in one way or another for her to have done that. But it's this idea, I call it the power of the pause. And I personally used to be very emotionally reactive. I had a lot of undealt trauma that I let get the best of me, and it's not an excuse. It is very much what my reality was. And I did not have the ability for self-regulation at the time. And it's something I've had to work really hard on, throughout my life to get to that place. And I was always immediate to respond with not the best choice of words or reaction. And so it's this idea of having the emotional regulation to take that pause for a moment and have the control to choose how you would like to respond to that. Because if you aren't in control of it, then it has control over you, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to have our own control over that. So I always teach this. I work with academies a lot as well, but I teach regulate the breath. That's number one. If you can regulate the breath, you can regulate your mind, right? So you're bringing everything down. And then if you can regulate your mind, you can regulate your actions and your reactions. And so you can also interchange regulate with control, because I think that control maybe sounds a little bit more like powerful. So control the breath, control the mind, control actions and reactions. And that's exactly what, I thought of when you said she felt it, she took some breaths, which was able to control her mind for a moment to then have the emotional regulation to choose how to respond. And in that moment, she chose, like, I'm going to take a step back. And I'm gonna, take a few more breaths. So I think that that's really powerful, and I do think that's a metric of success.
Yeah, I agree. I never necessarily like. I didn't think of it as a metrics. I thought it like, wow, that's good. But you're absolutely right. Like those are the examples of when people like, and it just came to me as we were talking about. Like those are the examples of when you say, "Why do you have your own academy?" Well, let me give you one example, right? Because otherwise, you'd say people are better trained or they're doing things that like, okay, maybe, maybe not. But when you can give real life examples, and in policing, because we have to, sound like we're really, you know, tactical with all these things. We call it a tactical pause. So we tell our officers before they run into something, take a tactical pause. Even if it's 1 second, look around, look at your surroundings, look at yourself. Okay, go. Versus, just going, right? Take a tactical pause, figure it out for 1 second, and then go. Or maybe decide, I'm not going. I'm going to wait for my backup. Like
Yeah.
those are the things that come to you when you just take a moment versus go, 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 go.
Yep, I love it. And I always make the joke too, like you just put tactical in front of anything.
Exactly.
Tactical yoga, tactical breathing, tactical,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There
whatever.
you go.
I have one final question. I know that I'm running over here, but I have one final question for you. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way.
Great question. I would say just be honest with yourself. You don't have all the answers. You don't have all this figured out. Like just own that. Like if if you're the smartest person in every room you walk into, you're walking into the wrong rooms. Like surround yourself with people that are smarter, people that have been through stuff, people that'll call you out on your when you're fall, you're not being at your best. Like surround yourself with people like that and just be good with my team only starts to laugh now. Like I'll bring out these ideas and have like a bunch of passion behind it. And if they were a bunch of followers, they'd be like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. And they've learned with me. It's like, okay, well, chief, we can't do that because it's illegal, or we can't do that because well, I'm like, oh, okay. But I love I love the idea of passion. I love the idea of going after something and really just going 100 100 miles an hour towards a big goal. Like I love energy and people who are energetic and that's my biggest advice for people in any interview they're ever in. I'm like, bring some energy. Like that's I think you can say bad things sometimes, not bad, but not the right answer. But if you got it with energy, like then the person, if I'm hiring them, like, well, I just need to redirect their energy because give me somebody who's passionate about something, then I know I can probably just get out of their way. So back to the advice, I would just say that, like, just be honest with yourself. You're not going to be able to figure everything out. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to look back at decisions you made in your past, be like, yeah, it probably wasn't the best. Okay, don't beat yourself up with it. Understand what happened. Do better next time. Learn from your mistakes. Teach somebody else from your mistakes. Just have a good support system around you. And I'd say that's the best thing. And don't be, I think you have to be secure with yourself. Like if you say something dumb, it doesn't mean you're dumb. If we all, and don't be, well, I'm the chief. I can't come across as being weak or not knowing something. It's like, I'd rather come across not knowing something and being authentic than looking like I know something and I'm just wrong. Like,
Yeah.
when people ask me a question, I'll be like, do you want me to tell you what I think or do you want the right answer? Because if you need the right answer, I may need a couple hours to go do some research. I may need to go, but if you want to tell me what I think, like what the answer probably is, I can do that for you. So I just don't like people who give bad information or bad advice because they feel they need to show that they're in charge and they have everything figured out. So I would just say, be honest with yourself. You're going to make mistakes, surround yourself with good people, live a life of passion, like whatever you're trying to do, don't do it, don't fake it. Like really what gets you up in the morning and go after it. And I love working with the community. People think I'm crazy. I love going to community meetings. I love going to community meetings where people are unhappy. And because I feel I can make them happy, I feel like we can make change. And so I just own it. Like in policing, man, I tell cops all the time, when you retire, if you do this job right, you never ever have to wonder, did I make a difference in this world?
Mhm.
Like it's baked into it. If you're doing this job right, every single day, you're making a difference in this world. And so I know people that make a lot more money than me. They're able to do a lot more things than me, but they also try to spend their time on weekends thinking, how can I make a difference? Is my life worth, where can I go and volunteer time? I don't spend any time thinking about that. I don't spend any time thinking, is my life meaningful? Am I making a difference in my community? I just know every day I am. And so, and so I would just tell them, own it, do it right. And man, then you'll have an amazing career. But also own the idea of, if things go bad, like, get in there. There's a book out there, Extreme Ownership. We have everybody read it here when they're going through testing processes. Like, don't make excuses. Like, we can all make an excuse for anything that went bad in our life. I think people like people who just say, yeah, didn't go the way I wanted it to, and I'm not going to do that again. And just don't make an excuse. Just own it.
Yeah.
I guess that would be what it would, own it.
I love it. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it so much. I'm so happy we were able to have this conversation today.
Me too. I can't believe it's been an hour. That was
I
fun.
know it flew by. I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh, we're running over. So I appreciate you spending some extra time with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Of course.